So, this is my great honor to present Professor HOODBHOY to all of you. But what a great occasion to have someone that inspired me. And how did he inspire me? I read an article in Dawn that he had written about Mutazilites and the rationalism, origin of rationalism in the concepts of the Islam. So I started reading about it. From that time on, I have been reading about it for long, long hours. And it's such an honor for me to be a part of a occasion where I can sit with him and see who inspired me. And people say people get inspired from me, and I'm inspired by people who are greater than me. And I sit in the company of Aristotle and Socrates of the world. He's one of the greatest thinkers that Pakistan has produced. It's a sad situation in Pakistan that we are unable to really encapsulate the entire philosophical thinking that has resulted into the issues that we face in Pakistan today. Today, I introduce to you Professor HOODBHOY, who is very dear to me in my intellectual thought process and who has helped us all in developing a concept of rationality and reason within the concepts of religion and revelation. So let's talk to him, and the discussion today is basically what happened, why did we digress from where we were, and why the golden age that we call did not continue. So I will request Professor HOODBHOY to highlight the salient features that inspired me 35, 40 years ago to think about what was Mutazilites, what was Averroes and Ghazali debate, what was the issue that inspired the concepts that we are now debating after 1400 years. Thank you, Professor HOODBHOY. Thank you very much.
This is the very first time that I'm meeting Mr. Iqbal Latif, but I had heard of him earlier. It's my absolute pleasure to be with a person who has exceptional qualities, who is not just a businessman, but a person with vision, a person who cares about his country, and who is, like many of us, very puzzled about what happened to the great religion, Islam, which today finds itself bereft of any achievement in science, in technology, in philosophy, and in any area of knowledge. So I will take the starting point that Iqbal has been pondering about the origins of where did we go wrong. So I have to tell you where we went right and how science and learning entered in Islam, which was a desert, which was the outcome of a desert culture 1500 years ago. At the time of the Holy Prophet, there was no science, no learning. But 150 years after him, because Muslims were very successful militarily, they were spreading all the way to the east towards India. Remember that Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Sindh in 712 AD. The Prophet died in 630. So just some 70, 80 years later, the area of Pakistan that is now known as Sindh was conquered by a general. He was actually just 19 years old when he came there. But in that same period, Islam was spreading all the way to Spain, and it was spreading northwards as well, and it reached the areas that today constitute Iraq. And there in Baghdad, Muslims encountered the treasures of Greek civilization, and they were totally taken aback that, hey, what on earth is all this? We don't understand it. We don't understand the language. And so, because there was a great degree of curiosity, there was a spirit of what one could call pluralism, of enlightenment. There was this desire to acquire things that they did not know, and so the caliphs, they ordered a process of translation. Now, the translators initially were not Muslims, they were Christians, they were Nestorians, they were Jews, and even a couple of Hindus. And that process then generated within, the process of translation generated within Islam a huge amount of energy. We want to know this, we want to know that. And so between the 9th and the 13th centuries, something like a good 400 years, Islam prospered not just militarily, but as a civilization. A civilization produces knowledge, it produces art, it produces culture. And in that sense, Islam then rose from being merely a warrior culture to being a great culture. Now, you mentioned, Iqbal Sahib, the Mu'tazila, and the Mu'tazila, well, these were the rationalists of Islam who said that the Islamic faith can be based not just upon what we are told in the Quran, what we are told by God, and which we learn from the time that we are born. And every Muslim learns how to read the Quran at a very early age, and I'm sure you did, and you must remember many ayats from that time. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, good, good.
My father made me read Quran 3 times.
Good.
So that was very important for him.
But you see, the Mu'tazila said that we can use reason and logic to understand the world around us. And so it's not just faith, it's also reason. And so they completely rejected the idea of predestination. That the notion that life is determined for you, that you are just a leaf that is blown in the wind, whichever way the wind takes you, you go there. Instead, you have agency. Agency is what makes you human. So this way of thinking went on for hundreds of years. And it is this period that resulted in all the great philosophers, the great mathematicians, the great astronomers, the great doctors of Islam, and there are very many of them, and kids learn their names in school. But then you see, the Mu'tazila got challenged by the traditionalists, who said that
Asharites.
The Asharites, exactly. And so there was a man by the name of Al-Ashari who said that these are deviants from the faith, and that in fact, so there was a process of theological disputation which became fairly bloody, in fact very bloody, and the Asharis were suppressed. They were, well, rightly or wrongly, I mean, there's a lot of argument that you can make on that, but the Mu'tazilites, because they had the support of the caliphs of that time, people like Abdul Rahman, Al-Mamun, Harun al-Rashid, etc. So they prospered for a long time. But then came a very important challenge to this way of thinking, and it came Well, it must have come from various quarters, but it came primarily from one man who traveled a long journey from being a rationalist to being the greatest enemy of rationalism.
Al-Ghazali.
Imam al-Ghazali. Yes, okay. You see, he is very highly revered today. And what Imam al-Ghazali said, he said many things, but since we are talking about science, well, he said, look, mathematics, yeah, it's fine, it's not proscribed in the Quran, but you know, you have too much of mathematics and then you start thinking that you can solve all the problems just using reason and logic, and so you get drunk. So it's like wine, it goes to your head, and then you start the process of disbelief. Then then he made a frontal attack on the notion of causality. What causality says is that everything that we see in the world around us, every physical phenomenon, has got some cause behind it. So, for example, you hear thunder. Okay, why did the thunder happen? Well, it was caused by lightning. Why did lightning happen? There's a cause for that. The clouds get charged, etc. He said, no. There is no cause. There is no link between cause and effect. And he said, so he was taken. Now you mentioned Ibn Rushd, Averroes, the man who is most highly the challenger. So Ibn Rushd says, in his criticism of Ghazali, and this is a debate that, and remember that Averroes, Ibn Rushd, same name, came 50 years after Ghazali. And what he did was he picked apart the arguments that Ghazali had made and he put it in very strong, plain language. And he picked out examples from Ghazali and showed how ridiculous they were. Number one, and I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. One was that you think that if there's a piece of cotton and you apply a little flame to it, the flame will cause the cotton to burn. Rubbish. It's actually the angels that God sends down which burn the cotton. Give you a second example, and this is quoted, I'm quoting from Averroes. You think
Tahufatul Falsafa was Ghazali's book, and then Averroes wrote the book Incoherence of the Philosophers was Ghazali's book, and Incoherence of the Incoherence was reply of Averroes to Ghazali.
Absolutely, and you see, Iqbal remembers. Yeah, so the original book was called Tahuft al-Falasifa, Rejection of the Philosophers.
And then he said Tahufatul Tahufat.
Then he wrote Tahuft al-Falasifa, rejection of the philosophers. Okay, so in that he says, so you know, we were talking about bread. You eat a piece of bread and you think that eating the bread has made your stomach feel nice. Rubbish. It's actually God who sends down the angels, and it's the angels who make you feel good in your stomach. And I'll give you one final example. And this is that of an arrow which is speeding towards its target. And so the arrow is heading towards his heart like that. But you know, even when the arrow is over here, I can't say it'll hit him. Even when the distance is halved, and then further halved, and then further halved, no matter how close it gets to Iqbal, that arrow will not hit him. Because at every instant, God destroys the universe, and at every other instant, He recreates it. So it's destruction, creation, destruction, creation. So you have time slices, time being sliced, time being discretized, and no connection between one time slice and the other. So this is the denial of causality. That you cannot say, you cannot predict what will happen. Now, you know, in Ziaul Haq's time, you want to talk a little bit about Ziaul Haq? I don't want to talk too much about it.
You know, one of the most important things that we should all understand, that we are talking about reason and logic and rationalism, and that is what has created the entire problem today in the milieu of Islamic societies. We have rejected reason. Like when Tahufatul Tahufat and Tahufatul Falsafa by Ghazali came, and when Averroes replied him, I want to highlight, and people like Professor HOODBHOY keep highlighting the fact that it was Al-Biruni and Avicenna. If you ever, I would request you to go and read the letters written by Al-Biruni, Abu Rehan Al-Biruni, to, my son's name is Rehan, and therefore I named him Rehan because Al-Biruni was my ideal. When he wrote the huge, beautiful letters to Avicenna, which Avicenna was not able to, and Avicenna is the rational professor, you would see that that debate, I'm not exaggerating, I'm a very rational thinker, that debate is as good as a debate between Einstein on theory of relativity and Heisenberg uncertainty principle, when mathematical concepts of the universe and the philosophical concept of the universe, that is a kind of debate. Unfortunately, we have forgotten it completely. We have not gone back to the textbook. If you look into it, you'll see rationality and science gave the birth to the great kingdom of golden age. And that golden age was really the golden age. If anyone tells you it was not, they are wrong. They destroyed it. Ibn Tahima, when he took over, then from there, Ghazali and Averroes, Mutawakkil, as Professor Saab highlighted it, there was a time, but after Mahmud Rashid, that the translation stopped. Prophet came out, the Prophet armies came out from the barren land of Saudi Arabia, the Peninsular Arabia, and they came down. The Battle of Yarmouk, Amr bin al-As in Egypt, Saad bin Abi Waqas, they were.
But Iqbal, if you would go to that period, we can go far back into the past. But if you know,
they all created the kind of society that was rational. The golden age of Islam is based on rationality.
Absolutely,
rationality,
cannot.
Reason.
Nobody can dispute what you're saying. You're absolutely right.
They contributed. They put together the entire. They took the Zoroastrian, the Vedic, the Egyptian, the Pharaonic. They took everything together and then they put it. That's what the beautiful period was in the Abbasid time. And then we forgot it completely. And then we entered into the age where reason was rejected against the revelation.
Yeah, that is going back far into the past. But let me fast forward into the present being the 1980s in Pakistan. General Ziaul Haq takes over with the idea of remaking Pakistan. No longer is it to be a Muslim state. It is now to be an Islamic state. Everything has to be made consistent with what he thinks were the principles of Islam. And so among other things, well, all of education, but even science education has to be now made Islamic. And Islamic means the Ghazali, the Al-Ghazali version of Islam, anti-rational,
Absolutely.
anti-reason. And so let me give you just a couple of examples of how science was to be taught, how the prescriptions for teaching science during the Ziaul Haq era. Well, one was that when teaching biology to kids, you know, kids who are in third or fourth grade, don't ask them questions like what will happen if an animal doesn't get food. The answer is, of course, that the animal will die. Instead, say, what happens if God does not give an animal food? Then you can say he'll die because God willed it so.
Predestination.
The disconnect. Okay, let me make it clearer with another example. In the teaching of chemistry, do not give examples like hydrogen and oxygen, if brought together, will create water. No, that gives the student an impression as though it is the blind forces of nature which are running the universe. So the Islamic way of teaching chemistry is to say that when hydrogen and oxygen are brought together, then by the will of Allah, they turn into water. By the way, I wonder what makes alcohol. Is that also by the will of God? So anyway, this is the level of, this is how the teaching of science became in Pakistan. Maybe it didn't become as drastic as this, but it was all a negation of trying to find reasons, of trying to find connections. It was a killing of curiosity. And it's not just Pakistan which has gone through this. What we've seen is a decline over the last 700 years. And that is where we see, not Ghazali himself, you know, one man is nothing. But it's that way of thinking that then was so pervasive. And if we want to look today, well, you see that in spite of a lot of resources that have been poured into developing science and technology, well, look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has got unlimited amounts of oil money, and it did build a lot of universities. It created laboratories. It imported professors from the United States, Europe, everywhere. But because the kind of mindset that is needed for the development of science was considered anathema, it was considered as something that was poisonous to faith. Therefore, the way in which Saudi kids were educated, the way in which Pakistani kids, and in much of the Middle East, the way in which they are brought up, suppression of curiosity, suppression of the natural instinct to know and find causes, that is what has led to the decline of the sciences in Islam.
And you know, one of the reasons that we need to have these kind of discourses is the idea of opening our minds. Curiosity and questioning is one of the most important things in faculty of reason and rationality. When you stop reason, when you stop rationality, when you stop questioning, it is a disaster that is waiting to happen. You should question everything. What does people tell you? Don't question. When you don't question, you start the descent towards dark ages, and those dark ages we are confronting right now. There are no conspiracies in the world. What we do, we get a result of that. So, in my personal opinion, what Professor has highlighted here today is an extraordinary argument, or that we should think of reason, we should think of rationality. And look how few people imagine if this was a discourse by a big ulama, then there would be 1,000 people here tonight. But the fact of the matter is that it is the minority that has always led to the Renaissance. And always we missed our Renaissance. What happened after Averroes and Al-Ghazali was that we missed the Renaissance. Today we are in this jumble because we are in a mess, because the fact of the matter is that we have lost our Renaissance, that Rafayel, Leonardo da Vinci, and Michelangelo, they lagged in the time of Medici's. Today, 500 years ago, we are still struggling with the idea that should we teach our children the questioning? We should teach our future questioning. That's what Dr. Saab is saying. And that was the Black Hole Institute that he has created in Islamabad, and we are here to support that institute, is the questioning, the reason, the logic, and rationalism. And that is a debate that Averroes should win. If Averroes would have won 800 years ago or 900 years ago, I tell you honestly, there would have been a different situation in the world of Islamic milieu. Today we feel the challenges because we failed in certain aspects. We should recognize that. It's not about calling somebody an infidel. It's about highlighting the fact what Dr. Saab has been talking about it for last 30, 40, 50 years of his life, that reason and science should go hand in hand. That's what Averroes said. That's what he said, that reason is very important. And I think today the purpose of this meeting is that we should encourage an institution of long-term learning and rational process within the ambience, within the environment of Pakistan. And if we will not lead it, no one else would. And it's my honor and great pleasure to invite Dr. Saab and invite everybody else of you to be a part of that process, to learn and encourage each other, to at least encourage a dialogue that should lead into a process which may be helpful. Nations progress when they talk of reason and question, and their children are able to question. Are we able to question? No, we are not able to question. We are told not to question. We are told in madrasas not to question. What is infidelity about it? What is wrong about it? If the child asks you how the universe existed, it did not exist in 6 days. We know it very well.
You know, if we hadn't heard of Averroes and Al-Ghazali, we would still know today that we're not doing well at all, that look at the state of the Muslim world, 1.8 billion people and producing very little and all that. And each one of us knows this, and each one of us is worried, not because a faith is in trouble, but because so many people are in trouble. And the consequences of that then visit the entire globe. And I'm sure that of the people in this room, in his or her in the very small domains that each one of us operate, we've been trying to do our best to do something about it. Well, Iqbal has given me this opportunity to tell you of what I've been trying to do over the last couple of years. So in a society where free thought is stomped upon, where you may not express it in your schools, colleges, or universities, in a society where everything, including what you eat, drink, and dress, is regulated, it's perhaps important to have at least a small oasis, and preferably many oases which nurture the kind of qualities that Iqbal Latif is talking about, of openness, of reason, rationality, and very importantly, humanity. Because we can be very reasonable, we can be very rational, and we can be very cruel also. So we've got to see how such oases can be built. And there are, I'm sure, many small pockets here, there, everywhere. I just want to describe to you one small pocket that my friends and I were able to create in Islamabad, and it's very small. In fact, it's probably a fifth of the size of this hotel, or maybe a tenth of the size of this hotel. But there's an auditorium, there's a library, and there's a children's laboratory for science where kids from nearby schools can come and play with science toys and make things for themselves. In the auditorium every day, now for 2 years, we have at least one event, or perhaps two, in which people can come and they can speak on anything and everything. Well, we, don't exercise censorship, but we also want to continue to keep doing this. So we have certain limits that you can't exceed. I think you will agree that this is a reasonable kind of formula. But the fact that we've been able to keep doing this now day after day, week after week, month after month, gives us a sense of some satisfaction. Then we have a team which goes out to schools and helps those schools get kids to start liking science, hopefully loving science. And now we've started a scheme for training teachers, because the teachers in Pakistan go through that system and they become authoritarian. They become, first of all, they're ignorant, most of them. What we want to do is create an elite of teachers, and we're going to start with just 6. And the test for that is on Saturday, by the way, 3 days from now. And we want to create an elite of teachers who will think like, I hope many of us think, and who are also competent in physics and math. Now, physics and math, why do I emphasize that? Because that's where, how the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution started out over here. Yeah, we're going to go beyond physics and math. We'll have other science subjects. We'll have, hopefully in time, as the black hole expands, we'll have teachers being trained in every subject, and being able to project that and being able to teach kids how to think. The most important thing about education is learning how to think and learning how to learn. Because there's a vast amount of stuff out there on the internet, and we're going to help them to learn from the internet. Those are ambitions. There are lots of things we want to do, but we need support. This is a rented building. The rent is astronomical. Everything in Islamabad is hugely expensive. We run on a shoestring budget. Everything is audited. We are constantly under surveillance by the authorities. We cannot make any mistakes. And therefore, not only have to be careful in what we say, but also in terms of how we spend. And, okay, let me put it bluntly, we can't survive without people's support, your intellectual support, but also your financial support.
The reason we invited you, and we have been very vocal about it, and I personally, as a student of Professor Saab for a long time, for 40 years, or so when I was a young man,
movie?
24.
Movie.
I have really learned a lot, and I owe my allegiance to the ideas that he inscribed within my thought processes. Mathematics is the language of God. Mathematics is a language of God. Physics is a language of God, I tell you honestly. And there can be no one who can say otherwise. Because Fibonacci numbers, if you look at it, and you look at anything which you look within the entire expanse of universe, my history does not start with 1947. My history starts with 13.8 billion years. I am born out of singularity. Every atom and every atom in my body represents that singularity. That singularity is God, that unit. And therefore, for us, for our children to have this kind of thinking, a global thinking, which does not at all contradicts the ideological confines that we are born within. Had it not been for the golden age, we would not be sitting here. So we are really bound to let's become what we are today, and let's pass it on. What Professor Saab is doing in Black Hole is like TAD, exactly like TAD. And that TAD is that children will come across from the people around. And that is the purpose of our commitment today. There are seats, 60 seats in the basement, and then there's the first ground floor, and then there's the first floor, and then there's the top floor. And they run on a very, if rational thinking has to be supported in Pakistan, we have to support the institutions that are leading the institutions that are leading the rational and reason. And therefore, I strongly propose, and therefore we have today already sold 3 seats before the meeting and 3 seats after the meeting, that 6 seats already in that, which is 500 pounds, we got 3,000 pounds we have raised to support Black Hole going forward. And we will try to continuously have this kind of dialogue and continuously support Dr. Pervez HOODBHOY's extraordinary efforts, not only to help us, but help the entire population of Pakistan to graduate, and our teachers. When you have great teachers, you produce great people. When you have lesser teachers, the whole idea of this meeting today is to introduce Professor HOODBHOY, Black Hole Institution, to all of you, and pass the word on to everybody that children need direction, and children, for them to need direction, they need teachers. What Professor HOODBHOY is doing is he's creating those teachers. We don't have proper teachers in Pakistan. People who can say, and teachers who can teach physics and mathematics as a language of God, language of creation. We are creation of that language. And with all due respect, this is nothing blasphemy or nothing else but beauty of elegance to express it in a manner that we all should respect what Professor Saab is doing. So today in London, it's my honor to welcome him, and I would generally say that we have already sold 6 seats, which is 3 from my family, 3 we got it from others, 6 of them, and if anyone, if not, any continuous support of Black Hole will be a great help for all of us. But I am so grateful that he is here. It's so much a nice feeling of gratitude, and I want to thank you, Professor Saab, to be here And you made me who I am today in terms of my rationality, of my writing, of my so-called little following that I have, but I'm really thankful to you.
You know, I am humbled. I am so grateful to
No,
you.
if one cannot thank, he's not good enough a man.
Thank you, Iqbal. Thank you very much.
You already talked about the 80s when Ziaism came and how things went into Islamization. That was the time when I was doing my high school and my college and my degree in maths. I did in Pakistan. And some of the few things, that still, even before Zia came, exist like, for example, you talk about physics and math. And we did even graduation in physics and math. You go and ask your teacher, this integration we are doing, the differentiation we are doing, this physics equation we do, where do we apply it? And they will tell you to shut up, just stick to the thing you're going to get. So how are you going to change that approach?
That's exactly the point. You see, it's not that there's some big ideology up there which is preventing you from knowing these basic tools of mathematics and physics, differentiation, integration. This is stuff that O-level kids learn. It's that the teachers don't know their subjects, and particularly in these areas which require a little bit of thinking. And this is what we want to change at the Black Hole. And as an experiment, we're taking on 6 teachers for which we've received, as of today, 500 applications. Well, we're going to have a test that will weed out 2025. We'll interview about 2025. But yeah, the point is to create this elite core of teachers, and then hopefully they'll produce more, and let's hope for the branching effect from there. But yeah, what you say is absolutely right.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, there are questions there. You can speak from here, yeah.
Actually, I want to ask a question about Islam and science. When we blame Ghazali about the decline of golden period of Islam, his main attack was on the philosophers, right? The Greek philosophy. But when today we see the curriculum of the Madaris, especially the Dars-e-Nizami, and I have personally read the Dars-e-Nizami books as I am graduate from Darul Deoband. So,
from Darul
Deoband.
Deoband, wow.
Okay. So when we see the books of Dars-e-Nizami, especially which are taught in Deoband, we see that most of the books are on the Greek philosophy. Even in the books of Aqaid, the theology, the quantity of philosophy is much more than the original Masail of Aqidah. Like we read the books of Sa'duddin Taftazani, so he tried to explain each and every theological argument with the Greek philosophy. So today also in the Dars-e-Nizami, Greek philosophy has a very huge part. So regardless of that also, while the intellectual capacity declined, we had philosophy in our books. I think Ghazali failed to finish off the philosophy from Muslim institutions. Then also, what was the reason?
Okay. So just to give a bit of context, our friend over here has gone through a madrasa, and this is a madrasa that was created under the Dars-e-Nizami, which was the creation of Nizamul Mulk 1100 years ago, and which has essentially not changed since that time. Now actually they teach in the books that are used in madrasas, and maybe it's in your madrasa, but certainly it's there in other madrasas, that the world is made up of 4 elements: earth, fire, air, and water. And they teach that the earth is flat, and they teach that the sun goes around the earth. And in fact, we have mullahs on television.
You've seen that, yeah.
You've seen that, who actually scold kids who say that in our geography books.
I felt sorry for the bull actually.
I did too.
But these things that
And actually, you know, the reason that I found this out was because I was in Professor Abdul Salam's office. This is 1984, 85. And we were talking about something, and his secretary came in and she said, Professor Salam, the BBC would like to interview you about the recent book by the Sheikh. And he said, he told her, tell them I'm not interested. Then he laughed and he turned to me and he said, and then he turned to her and said, bring the book. And that's where I saw this book with the title, and I said, Professor Salam, may I have a copy of it? A photocopy? He said, sure. And so I have a photocopy of it somewhere in my archives. That's madrasa education, frozen in time.
So what you're doing is great, popularizing science, teaching children. I think that is something, if people want to have their faith, it's fine. The other question, have you seen Oppenheimer?
You know,
I knew you haven't.
I have.
Okay. So I think watching movies like this, and we were young, Carl Sagan, and we always wanted to see, and I think popularizing science, and you can have your faith if you want, that's absolutely fine. And I think what you are doing is, in Black Hole, is something really teaching the children, and I think we need science and logic to go hand in hand. And I think that is something really important for, that's why we are, I think, most of us here, not talking about trying to sort out any mathematics puzzles or logic puzzles, but I think the good point was about when Averroes and Ibn Rushd, and I think there was a conflict and your theology and your fake scientific facts, but it can be quite difficult to have a kind of dissonance when you have a scientific fact on one side and which clashes with your faith. It creates a little bit of, confusion in a young mind. Yeah, and I think that can create a lot of contradiction and also confusion in somebody's mind. So I think the trick should be somehow that you keep your faith on one side and move on with science. I think that will probably be the only way forward. Because if you can't start fighting, I think it wouldn't take us far. And
We can't survive.
We then can't survive. So my question were two questions, so I've done it. So if I paid 500, so I'm happy to do that. So watch Oppenheimer as well.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I wanted to hear your kind of views on Oppenheimer because it became such a big.
Okay, first of all, we're going to watch Oppenheimer at the Black Hole.
Okay, good.
All right. And we'll have a full audience over there, and then we'll have a discussion on Oppenheimer.
Followed by Barbie. Yes.
But you know what I have to tell you about Oppenheimer? He's making the bomb. He's running the bomb project. Wasn't so great. It's his conceiving the black hole, which was his greatest scientific achievement. And let me dwell on that just a little bit. You know, black holes, they are formed when gravity overcomes every other force. So a star, when it runs out of fuel, it starts to collapse. Now it'll collapse and then, okay, there's no pressure outwards, so gravity will make it shrink in. But then everybody thought that, look, it'll eventually stop contracting, because once you squeeze matter, it reacts back, it pushes back. It's like you press on the table, okay, the harder you press, okay, take water, or take a gas. You press on it, it pushes back. Okay, then it becomes water, it pushes back even more. That water will become solid and it'll press still more. Okay, then what happens? It'll keep pushing more and more back. But Oppenheimer showed that there's a limit to which matter can push back, and that eventually it'll collapse into a point. And so the solution of Einstein's equation, which everybody had thrown away, Oppenheimer demonstrated that to be actually a physical solution. That was, I think, a much bigger thing than making the atom bomb.
Right, you know that, very good.
Brilliant.
You know, we often invoke the Zia era as like the inflection point where this regression in the Pakistani society kind of like began. But in your book, you actually name Sir Syed as one of the forefathers of Pakistan. And this is someone who at one point in time had dubbed mangoes to be haram because haram or makruh, I forget, but kind of like biddat, because the Prophet had never had a mango. So this is admittedly one of the forefathers of Pakistan. Do you think, like, given that fact pattern, Pakistan ever had a chance of protecting that regression?
Well, look, I actually related that anecdote because it showed that Sayyid Ahmad Khan, who is the greatest reformer that the subcontinent has ever produced, started from an ultra-conservative position that the eating of mangoes was forbidden in Islam. He moved away from that to the point where he said miracles didn't actually happen.
Yes.
And so, yeah, what you said is absolutely right, but my intent in relating the mango episode was to show something else. Could Pakistan have been different? In my childhood it was, and it was moving towards modernity, however it was born, it was moving with a positive slope. And then things started going wrong, and then look, this will take us off the discussion track, and that gets me into the subject of my book, and that's for tomorrow.
What as a whole message of Quran, which is actually to explore and to become more, I think, scientific, number one. At the same time, I think the beginning verse of Quran, it starts with read. Yeah, read. So Iqra. Yeah, so it's from the God's direct message to humans. Now what you have referred to, that's the humans. We have taken it wrong. That's our fault. But that doesn't mean that perhaps that Islam is, or the Quran is saying us to be not to be scientists. So it's in other way, it seems that you are trying to say Muslims cannot be the scientists, or in this world, in this country, Christians cannot be the scientists, or the Jews cannot be the scientists, because more or less the Bible, the Old Testament and the Quran, they are 90% similar, the message is similar. So that means that I think perhaps I'm no one here to change your ideology. However, linking that with the religion, what you're doing is that it's the basic essence of a teacher, that to make students to ask, to explore. And in this room here are the biggest examples, yourself, Professor Jawad, Iqbal, Latif, and many on the chat, that I don't think so. Our society, our parents, and they stopped us at least to ask questions about science. Yes, I agree with you. It is about the religion, whatever religion or sect you are, you're not asked to do questions about that. However, when it comes to science or studies, I'm here because they sent me to study. And there's a majority, Professor Jawad has left his home and he's here. Where he was born, he's not there, he's here. And what exceptional and phenomenal professors. You yourself, you named Abdul Salam and all. We are good, but from your, I perceive that, now stop, stop being scientific, because we are Muslims.
Okay, so I must apologize for not being sufficiently clear in my expression. I at no point said that you cannot be a good scientist and you cannot be a good Muslim at the same time. I did not say that. I will not ever say that, because there are obvious counterexamples. Abdul Salam, who was deeply religious and yet was got the Nobel Prize in physics. And so that's a clear counterexample. What is the true Islam remains to be discovered and is different for different people.
Right.
The Islam that Maulana Maududi thinks is true or which Osama bin Laden thought was true, and the Islam which different people over here believe to be true are all very, very different. There is no Pope in Islam who will adjugate on which is the right thing. There is no one who sets the doctrine. And in this sense, I think Islam is more democratic than certainly Catholicism. How many different Islams are there? More than 72 sects. There are roughly 1.8 billion different Islams. That's the number of Muslims who live on this earth currently. And so you're welcome to make what you want of Islam, and what you say is right. It's also right that there are people, actually a majority of Muslims, whose way of thinking is incompatible with science. It's not that Islam tells them to think that way, but that that's the way they've been brought up and conditioned.
It's okay, I think.
Yeah, but you can.
All right.
It's better because it's going on Facebook and all.
Yeah, my question is related to this gentleman's question. I mean, he was saying about Islam, why Muslims cannot be good scientists or something like that. What I think, where we can set something like Islam and science. Islam says something completely different. Any religion says completely different, whereas science says something completely different. We believe, Muslim people believe that, we've been created, kun, and we are here. Science say evolution. So that's a fundamental question. When we say Islam or religion, then we are believing on those creation things. When we are coming to science area, then we are coming on the evolution thing. Evolution is a part, and it's a series of evolution. There's a very big difference between Islam, between religion and science. So my question, how can we keep at the same time science, true science or true religion? It's very big difference. And what I personally believe that science, okay, another thing is, in religion there is no any question. It's only belief, it's only faith. It's just belief, no question on whatever holy books are saying. But in science, continuously research. There's a labs, there are things are there. We always scientists people, they always think and then create, then discover new things. But in religion, there is no any new discoveries. Whatever happened 1400 years before, 3000 years before, it happened. That's it. We have to follow that. We have to just keep following that path. So this is my question. How can we keep both things at the same time?
You brought up the question of evolution, and that's where, as I say, the tire hits the road? Rubber hits the road, yeah. Yeah, look, you cannot even begin to study modern biology without accepting evolutionary theory. It's the foundation of modern biology. It's as fundamental as Newton's laws are to physics. Okay, so end of the discussion. Darwinian evolution is as solid scientifically as anything.
Yeah.
All right? So how do you reconcile it? Is it possible to reconcile? And would you be surprised if I told you that in Iran, they actually teach, Iran is a theocratic state, and my experience over there is of 20 years, 25 years ago when I went there for a mathematical physics conference, and I asked my colleagues over there, can I see your school books? And I looked at the school books, and I know enough Farsi to understand what they're talking about. And they were teaching evolution then. And I said, my God, this is kufr. How can you be teaching evolution? And they said, kufr? Why? And it turned out that Ayatollah Khomeini had said, yeah, evolution's fine. There's no such thing as Islamic biology. There's no such thing as Islamic mathematics. Very, very different from Pakistan. And what I was telling you earlier about hydrogen and oxygen making water. So I don't know what theological justifications people invent. They're all inventions. But you can invent reasons which make this kind of a consistency possible. Don't ask me whether it is proper or correct from a theological point of view, but they do it. They can do it. So let's be grateful for that.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Latif, for inviting me. I think we discussed enough thing about past. We are going back 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, what happened, and all that. We are in 2023. Let's talk about Pakistanis, especially. We have American schools, we have British schools. Still absolute malarkey is happening in 2023. Still we are just doing photosynthesis. Still we are just doing the biology, just open the frog and just do this and that. What is stopping us? Who is stopping us? Why we don't have astrophysicists? Why we don't have quantum physics? Why we are not having all these things? I don't think so Islam, I don't think so mullahs, I don't think so anybody is stopping us or our children, but we are just behind IT, business and all that. We are not interested. And I don't know the reason, I don't know the cause, but I would like to know from you, from your experience, what is it? What is really stopping us to learn all these things? Because now we have, now we cannot talk about that, or there is only madrasas and mullahs and all that. We have all these English schools, universities, private schools, universities and systems. In Lahore, Islamabad, Karachi, I'm from Karachi, and I know there are plenty of schools, they are charging horrendous amount of money from the parents, and still they are not teaching. So please, if you can just shed some light on it.
Absolutely correct that there are such schools, but those are 1%. 2% of such schools, 98% is the rest. Not madrasas, but the schools that use the regular curriculum. And that regular curriculum is purely based upon memorization. It is the very antithesis of what science should be. We could go from to a different level of argument and say that philosophical curiosity does not exist or is suppressed. And that is true. In spite of having schools like this, which you mentioned, where they taught the same stuff that they taught here in Britain or in France or anywhere. And remember that these 1 or 2% of schools, they subscribe to the O levels, A levels, international baccalaureate, whatever, and yet they have produced very little. So here it is a question of societal values. What does society value? There are a lot of good businessmen, a lot of good traders. There are people who know how to manage hotels. There are people who know how to run the stock market, etc. All that is there. But there are not enough people. A complex society needs all kinds of people. But a complex society also needs people who are thoroughly grounded in the rational sciences, in the hard sciences.
I want to, Professor Saab, say that it's so right that it is the core essence of 2 or 3% of the society that makes a nation grow big. I had written a letter 14 years ago to one of the rulers of Pakistan. I said, just give me few facilities of your cantonments and I'll give you 10 gold medals in Asian Games in 4 years' time. So they never replied to it, honestly speaking. And what I think is that if we have an extraordinary ability, you're right, Fadi, that we have people like Professor Saab, people like Iqbal, Latif, and my own children, I've seen it. We were brought up, and I took them, after Kuwait invasion happened, the first thing I had it on, I had a house in Paris and I had it in London. I went to Pakistan. My wife, who is an Iranian, told me, no, I will go to a country where my children will have a sense of identity. We went there. Rehan is sitting there. He's a global head of Morgan Stanley, global head. he's sitting right there in glasses. And, and one of the most extraordinary achievers in life, one can be proud of. But he just came by chance. I'm not trying to blow off something. What I'm trying to say is, he studied in Froebel's in Islamabad. We have the ability. We are one of the most extraordinary, genuinely good people. Tadabburu and tafakkuru, think and reason, is most important injunction of the Holy Book. We have put it down. We don't think and we don't reason.
Good presentation. So, Iqbal Sahab, may I present this book of mine? It's called Pakistan: Origins, Identity and Future. And if I may read out from this. For Iqbal Latif, a man of rare acumen and one who knows that thought must be unfettered, with my profound regards.
Thank you.